Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. I'm going to wait just a couple of minutes before we get started. We've got people in the lobby coming in, so give us just a couple minutes and we'll get started. All right, good morning again. Thank you all for joining us today for our WIKA University on how to select a pressure gauge with Daniel Burch. Before I turn it over to Daniel, just a couple of housekeeping things. We are recording this session, just so you know, and also everyone is muted. But if you have any questions or comments for Daniel, you can just pop them in the chat and I'll make sure that he gets those. And that's all I have, so I'm going to turn it over to Daniel.
All right, thanks, Johnny, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming to the uh, session that we have today. And what we're going to be covering specifically is going to be how to select the right type of gauge using a standardized framework that we have. And it's an acronym that I'll cover here momentarily. Uh, but first, I want to give you just a little bit of an introduction to myself, my counterpart, my senior product manager, Hardy Orzakowski, that I work with. We both cover the mechanical pressure and temperature gauge line here at WIKA. Um, as you can see, I've been here for 20 years. Hardy's been here for 41 years. So there's a lot of experience that we have when it comes to the mechanical pressure and temperature side. And that's what I'll be covering specifically today. Now, the framework that I'm going to be touching on, you could also utilize that for some of the other products that we cover, whether that be force, level, flow. You would just have to kind of adapt it accordingly. But this should at least give you what I'm going to cover a good framework for questions that need to be asked when you're selecting the right gauge for the particular application you have. Before I get started going over this slide, the way I would equate this would be selecting a gauge. I mean, there's so many different varieties of gauges, different sizes, different configurations, whether it be on the temperature side or the pressure side. Um, think of it when you go into somewhere like an advanced auto parts, or even if you're online, looking for, let's say, a particular headlight replacement bulb that you need is they're going to ask you what type of car you have, what year it is, what model, size engine. They're going to ask all these details to narrow down to make sure that they give you the best adequate gauge for the particular model that you have or particular need. And it's pretty much the same with a gauge. I mean, we have, like I said, so many different varieties of gauges, just like, again, headlights, you would see different bulb sizes and types and brightnesses. Um, it's the same way in that world. So just coming in, if you said, "Oh, I need a pressure gauge," that's not going to be enough information. You're going to have to cover a wide variety of items to check off on a checklist to be able to see exactly what the best gauge or gauges for that particular application are going to be. So as you can see here on the screen, the information that we would need to configure any type of pressure or temperature gauge, uh, things are going to be like your case diameter. So what is the nominal size? That could be anywhere from down to an inch all the way up to 10 inches or even larger, depending on the particular application. Uh, the wetted parts material. So the media for that particular application that you're needing to measure, um, is that material going to be compatible for that particular application, the material of the gauge? Because we have anything from brass gauges, wetted parts, stainless steel, Hastelloy, Monel, or even other specialty exotic materials for diaphragm seals applications or things like that. We won't get into those today, but all of that information is going to be vital to make sure that it's the right gauge for the job. The pressure or temperature range for that particular application, that's going to determine what material is going to be best suited. Uh, the process connection and the location. So, do you need something that's going to be a lower mount, like in the XL gauge you see on the right? Is it going to be something that's going to be installed in a panel to where you would need something like a center back mount with some type of flange on there? Uh, is it going to be a G style connection, or is it going to be an MPT style connection? All of these types of things. Um, in the case of looking at a temperature gauge like the thermometer you see there on the left, the stem length, how long does that stem need to be for that helix at the bottom to go in and measure adequately what the media is in that application. Also, the accuracy, is it going to be something that's going to be a more commercial style, let's say like a compressor type of gauge that really doesn't need to be precision accuracy? It can be like a 323 um, plus or minus on the full scale type of accuracy, or is it going to be something more precise, like a test gauge that may go down to a 0.25% accuracy of scale, or even more once you get into things like digital gauges? Uh, Also, excuse me, special options. So, does it need to be a filled case? Is there going to be high vibration in that particular application that's going to cause pointer flutter, to where maybe a fill fluid would help to mitigate that? Again, different types of mounting options. Like, does it need to be a front flange installed in a panel, or some type of rear flange? Uh, does it need any certificates? Does it need a calibration certificate? Does it need any type of material 3.1 material test report identification certificates? Any things like that, overpressure protection, any types of options and accessories that we offer. All that information is going to be able to help us narrow down and offer the uh, the best adequate gauges for that particular job. Um, Other additional information that would be needed: application and process conditions. So for something like hydrogen sulfide, you're not going to use a brass gauge on there. It's going to eat through it. So, you're going to need to go with a stainless steel in that case. So any types of things like that, like, and going back to what I was saying, even with the fill fluid. So in the application, is there high vibration? Is it going to be indoors? Is it going to be outdoors? Any types of information that we can have and that you can provide are going to help us narrow down and give you the right gauge for the job. Um, Things like estimated annual usage or quantity, that could factor in as well. I mean, depending on, is this a gauge that I need now? And we can offer a standard stocked item or common configuration that we have on the shelf, or is this going to be something a little bit more customized with a special range or special types of options that we're going to need a little bit more time, um, or in high volumes, to where it's going to go from something that we have in stock or something that we need to do as a made to order type of thing and open up capacity for. Um, Also, pricing. I mean, maybe you'd like to have a digital gauge for your job. They're nice, they're digital, they're fancy, they've got all the bells and whistles, but maybe that's going to be a bit overkill for what you need for your particular application. So understanding what kind of pricing you're looking at helps us to narrow down and say, okay, in that particular price range, here's the types of gauges that we would be able to offer that would or would not fit in that particular application. And so, with that being said, the framework that we use in dealing with this is called STAMPed. It's an easy acronym that you can remember. And just like the stuff I covered in the previous slide, when you look at that in comparison to the pictures on the right, so for S, having that size, that case diameter, and in the case of a thermometer, like a stem length, easy way to remember it. Having those details covers the S portion. For T, the temperature. So not only the process temperature of the media being measured, but also the ambient temperature. Is this going to be somewhere, let's say you're installing a gauge up in Canada and the temperatures get down to, sub-zero, and something, let's say like a glycerin fill fluid outdoors is not going to be adequate once it gets below -4 degrees Fahrenheit. You're going to have it's going to start to kind of harden up a little bit to where something like silicone, which can go down to -40, would be more adequate for that application. So both ambient and process temperature are important for that. A, the type of application. Is it going to be, a pharmaceutical application to where, you need to meet sanitary requirements? Is it going to be a process related application to where you may need things like ATEX, some kind of explosion um, things that need to be met. Having those application details is definitely important, as well as the accuracy, because depending on the going back into the size of the gauge, smaller gauges in general are going to have a wider accuracy range, like I was mentioning with a small compressor gauge at a 323% accuracy versus something like the process gauge at 4.5 and 6 inches you see there on the right that's going to be at a 0.5% accuracy. So depending on what your accuracy requirements are also going to determine what the best gauge is going to be that we can offer. The measuring range and the media for M. So the basic rule of thumb for measuring range is anything, whatever your application pressure is, let's say. So if your pressure in your application, your operating pressure is at 50 psi, then you want to get a gauge that's 2 times whatever that operating pressure is. So in the case of, okay, I'm operating at 50 psi, that gauge you see on the right at 100 psi would be the recommendation. That way you've got the pointer sitting there in that sweet spot at 12 o'clock, give or take. And it just helps with the longevity of the gauge too, to where you're not buying a 50 psi gauge for a 50 psi application and you're just maxing that gauge out at all times and possibly going into the overpressure zone. Again, the media, is it going to be something like air or water to where a brass gauge would be fine, or is it going to be something that's going to be more uh, corrosive and aggressive to where you would need to go to stainless steel? uh, Having these details are all important. When it comes to P, the process connection and the location. So again, like we talked about earlier, do I need an MPT style connection that's more American standard or something more European standard like a G connection? Am I going to mount it in a panel, or is it going to be something that's going to be just installed on top of a particular application that I just need to see outright? Same thing, like even if you look at thermometers, do I need something that's going to be lower mount fixed? Do I need something back mount? Or do I need, like we have with thermometers, an adjustable angle type of thing that I can adjust and fit into my application? So depending on what those details are, that's going to be important. Again, touching on the E for the extra requirements, such as case fillings, certificates, any type of accessories or approval that are required, that'll cover your E. And then D for delivery, as we talked about, is that something that for your particular need that oh, I just need a gauge that, meets these basic requirements and I need it today. I need it to ship today. Okay, that's something we can pull from stock and cover your needs. Or is this going to be something a little bit more extensive that's going to take a little bit more time, but you're willing to wait on whatever that lead time is? Um, Again, covering the additional information, the conditions, the estimated annual usage. Is this going to be a one-time order, or are we looking at, getting, thousands of pieces a year that perhaps we need to do some adjustments on to fit those needs? And then again, target pricing. So that is going to cover your stamped acronym, to where as long as you have that information there, we should be able to hone in each and every time and get you the right gauge for the job. And if you ever want, the WIKA webpage has a lot of good resources. I'll pull that up here real quick. So if you go to the WIKA US webpage and then go under company up here at the top and then scroll down to media, we have trade articles, blog articles. We also have a video section. And you'll see there the first one that pops up, selecting a pressure gauge, which goes over the stamped framework. Now, this one is specifically for just pressure gauges, and the one that I've provided here, I've incorporated the temperature gauge into there as well, but it covers the same framework in a more consolidated video if you ever need to go back there and reference it. And also, you can see some of the other WIKA use stuff we've done, why gauges fail, the 8 reasons that are common for gauge failures. That's a big common topic that a lot of people really enjoy. So you can always utilize this and find a lot of good information right there on the website. With that being said, you can also find us on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and again, just going to the WIKA website and finding the information you need there. Uh, and that pretty much covers the stamped framework methodology. There any questions?
There's none that's come in yet, Daniel, but anybody that has any questions, please put that in the chat for Daniel. And while we're waiting on that, I'll just let everybody know the next WIKA University is going to be November the 14th, and that's going to be on navigating the WIKA customer portal. That's with Gina Davis. So if you have, be on the lookout for the email and get registered for that. And everyone on the call today will receive a recording and the certificate of attendance for today's session. So be on the lookout for that as well. And I do not see any other questions come in, Daniel. So I think you did a great job. Everybody must have understood that. Um, oh, here's one right here, Daniel. It says that he lost his signal for about a minute. He said, do you have typical suggestion isolation valving for process gauges?
Yeah, so I mean, it's really going to depend on the application requirements and needs. That's one of the things as you're providing those details as far as what the application is, what you're trying to mitigate, what you're trying to cover. Any of those details, it's not something that we always just say, okay, buy a process gauge, here's an isolation valve. But if that's a need or requirement, it's definitely something that we can explore and offer.
Perfect. All right. Well, Daniel, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for your time today. I hope you have a great afternoon and happy Halloween, everyone.
Thank you.